Good day, JPians. Welcome back to discussion of the employee benefits. Now, we will move on to the second part, which tackles the deeper part of the lesson. Without further ado, let's get started. This lesson is divided into four parts. First, defined benefit plan. Second, components of defined benefit cost. Third, other long-term employee benefits and termination benefits. And lastly, summary. First is defined benefit plan. Is to provide the agreed benefits. Therefore, the employer bears the risk that the promised benefits will cost more than expected if actuarial or investment experience is worse than expected. Alam naman natin na sa defined benefit plan, ganito yung nangyayari. Si entity ay nagbibigay ng fund sa mga retired employee or sa mga employee na minamanage by the third party, which is the bank, insurance company, or even other agency, nang nakafix na. So, kapag kakulang ang fund, sila palagi yung mag-adjust. Which is laging pabor sa empleyado. Bakit? Kasi secured ka na. Secured na yung nakukuha mo na benefits from them. So, ang treatment nila doon ay inventories. Lagi silang nagme-maintain na dapat specific yung or fix yung fund na makukuha nila. The accounting for defined benefit plan includes 3 steps. First is to determine the deficit or surplus. Step 2, determine the net defined benefit liability or asset. And lastly, determine the defined benefit cost. So for step 1, determine the deficit or surplus. So dito, kung yung fair value of plan asset ay mas mababa kaysa sa present value of defined benefit obligation, meron itong deficit. So kung yung fair value naman ng plan asset ay mas mataas kaysa sa present value of defined benefit obligation, meron itong surplus. So ano ba muna yung fair value of plan asset? Ito yung balance ng fund na nakaset aside by the company. Tapos, yung present value of defined benefit obligation naman ay yung obligation ng isang company na accumulated retirement benefits na na-earn by the employee. Sa step 2, determine the net defined benefit liability or asset. Dito, kung sa first step ay deficit yung nakuha mo, it is net defined benefit liability. Pero kung surplus ang nakuha mo sa first step, it is net defined benefit asset. Kaso sa net defined benefit asset, hindi laging yung surplus yung ilalagay mo. Kasi pwedeng surplus or asset ceiling, whichever is lower.
Okay, so paano nga ba nakakaapekto yung asset ceiling sa net defined benefit asset? Kung may surplus ka na 150,000 at si company ay nag-set ng policy na 100,000 as asset ceiling, si net defined benefit asset ay marirecord siya based doon sa asset ceiling. Pero yung 50,000 na effect ng asset ceiling, ita-times yan sa discount rate. Tapos, marirecognize yon as what? Marirecognize siya as interest on the effect of asset ceiling.
Step 3, determine the defined benefit cost. Dito, meron tayong service cost at net interest na magfo-fall under or nare-recognize as net income or profit or loss. While yung remeasurements naman ay nagfo-fall or nare-recognize as OCI or yung other comprehensive income. So let's move on to the second part of this topic, which is components of defined benefit cost, which is the service cost. Under ng service cost ay yung current service cost. Ito yung pagtaas ng present value ng defined benefit obligation doon sa period na yon. Yung pangalawang under ng service cost ay ang past service cost. Ito yung changes ng present value ng defined benefit obligation from past period. It's either plan amendment or curtailment. Ano nga ba yung pagkakaiba ng plan amendment at curtailment? Kapag sinabi nating plan amendment, ito yung introduction, yung withdrawal, or yung pagbabago ng benefit plan na sinet ng isang company. While curtailment naman ay yung pagliit ng employees na covered ng isang benefit plan. So let's proceed sa last component of service cost, which is gain or loss on settlement. Yung computation for gain or loss or settlement is present value of defined benefit obligation minus the settlement price. Yung next components of defined benefit cost is yung net interest. For the net interest on the net defined benefit liability or asset, it is computed by defined benefit obligation minus the plan assets. While yung net defined benefit obligation ay nagre-result siya as interest expense. Pero yung net defined benefit asset naman ay nagre-result siya sa interest revenue or income. For the last components of defined benefit cost, which is the remeasurements. So for the remeasurements, the actuarial gains or losses, it is the changes in the present value of defined benefit obligation resulting from changes in actuarial assumption. Yung actuarial assumption, ito yung estimate ng variable na may malaking impact sa pag-provide ng post-employment benefits. It is also includes demographic assumption which deals with employees at financial assumption that focus on money. So, second, under remeasurements is the return on planned asset. It represents the investment income earned by the planned assets during the year after deducting the cost of managing the funded taxes. Let's have an illustration nung mga diniscuss nating concept kanina. For defined benefit cost, let's compute for the defined benefit cost of Sekaina collections. The following are fair value of planned asset for January 1, 1.5 million. Present value of defined benefit obligation for January 1 is 3 million. Vested past service cost is 400,000. Unvested past service cost is 250,000. Current service cost is 800,000. Benefits paid to retiree is 500,000. Net loss on settlement is 75,000. Actuarial gain during the period 50,000. Return on planned asset 100,000 and the discount rate is 10%. Dito, i-discuss na natin kung paano siya nakuha. For the solution, service cost, under nito yung current service cost, past service cost, and loss on settlement. Sa current service cost, given naman na siya, which is 800,000. For the past service cost, ito yung pag-addin mo yung 400,000 at saka 250,000, which is the vested and unvested past service cost. Makukuha mo ay 650,000. And then yung loss on settlement, 75,000. Pag tinotal mo silang lahat, ang makukuha mo is 1,525,000. Next naman tayo, yung interest on the net defined benefit liab or asset. Yung interest cost on defined benefit obligation, para makuha mo siya, yung present value ng defined benefit obligation ay 3 million. Imumultiply mo siya sa discount rate, which is 300,000. Para naman dun sa interest income ng planned asset, yung fair value ng planned asset ay 1.5 million. At imumultiply mo rin siya sa discount rate na 10%. Yung makukuha mo doon ay 150,000. Since interest income siya, ileless mo siya. So, ang makukuha mo ay 150,000. Yung magiging sagot na 1,675,000 ay marirecognize siya as profit or loss. For the remeasurement naman, yung actuarial gain ay given na, which is 20,000. Tapos, yung next naman, yung difference on interest income on planned asset ay 150,000, yung kanina na nakuha natin.
Tapos, ma-minus mo siya sa return on plan asset, which is the given na 100,000. Ang total nun, 50,000. So, ilalagay mo siya dyan. Pagka ang makukuha mong sagot na i-recognize sa OCI ay 30,000. So, pagpaplasin mo lang yung 1,675,000 sa 30,000, ang makukuha mo ay 1,705,000 for total defined benefit cost. So, paano nga ba kinukuha yung present value of defined benefit obligation using T account? So, yung beginning ay nasa credit side, yung benefits paid ay nasa debit side, yung current and past service cost ay nasa credit side, yung interest cost ay nasa credit side din, while yung actuarial gain or loss, alin man dun yung makuha mo ay pagka-gain nasa debit side, kapag ka-loss ay nasa credit side. So let's give an example of present value of the defined benefit obligation. So the following are the informations. First is the present value of defined benefit obligation for January 1. Which is 150,000, current service cost 60,000, discount rate 10%, benefits paid to retirees is 80,000. Decrease in present value of defined benefit obligation due to changes in actuarial assumption, which is 10. Here are the illustration for the present value of the defined benefit obligation using T accounts. So kanina, pinakita natin kung paano ba ilagay sila sa T accounts. So these are the following. For fair value of plan asset using T account, so dito nakalagay sa debit si beginning, return on plan asset, contribution to the fund, or sa credit yung benefit plan. This is the illustration for fair value of plan asset. The following information on Teres Marias Collection Defined Benefit Plan is shown below. First is yung fair value of defined benefit obligation ng January 1, which is 150,000. Meron ding return on plan asset, which is 60,000. Contribution to the fund during the year, 80,000. And benefits paid to employees, which is 10,000. Kagaya kanina, i-indicate lang natin sa T account yung mga given information dun sa illustration natin. Yung 150,000 for the beginning, 60,000 for return on asset, 80,000 for contribution to the fund, and for credit benefits paid, 10,000. For the actuarial valuation method, yung projected unit credit method sees each period of service as giving rights to an additional unit of benefit entitlement and measures each unit separately to build up final obligation. Yung projected unit credit method ay yung retirement benefit obligation na binabase sa future salary levels of employee. Attributing benefit to periods of service. Benefits are attributed to the periods of service using the plan formula. So, if benefits are materially higher for services rendered in later years than in earlier years, the benefits are attributed on the straight line basis. Let's proceed for the reimbursement and overfunding or underfunding. For the reimbursement, if it is virtually certain sa part ng company, nare-recognize siya as a separate asset at name-measure naman siya as fair value. So, dito naman tayo sa overfunding and underfunding. Kapag net defined benefit asset, it is overfunded. Net defined benefit liability, it is underfunded. And fair value of plan asset is equals to present value of defined benefit obligation, it is fully funded. For the third part of our discussion, which is other long-term employee benefits. Proceed naman tayo sa offsetting. Magkakaroon lamang ng offsetting kapag present tong dalawang to. First is yung legally enforceable rights, which is to use a surplus in one plan para masettle yung obligation under ng isa pang plan. Next is the intention.
it's either settle the obligation on a net basis. For other long-term employee benefits, it should be settled beyond 12 months. Examples are A. Long-term compensated absences, B. Jubilee or other long service benefits, C. Long-term disability benefits, and lastly, profit sharing, bonuses, and deferred compensation. Next is yung termination benefits. Yung termination benefits ay pwedeng mahati sa dalawa. Ito ay yung una, entity's decision to terminate. Yung entity mismo or yung employer mo mismo ang nagdesisyon na i-terminate ka or tanggalin ka sa trabaho. Yung sunod naman ay yung employee's decision to accept employer's offer. Decision mo na umalis or mag-resign sa trabaho mo dahil tinanggap mo yung offer ng employer mo. Let's proceed for the recognition and measurement of the termination benefits. For recognition, entity can no longer withdraw the offer of those benefits. And restructuring costs under PAS 37 that involves payment of termination benefits. For the measurement, termination benefits are accounted for according to their nature. Una, yung short-term benefits. Na-account siya as short-term benefits kapag payable within 12 months. Payable beyond 12 months naman are accounted for other long-term benefits. While enhancement to post-employment benefits are accounted as employment benefits. For the illustration of termination benefit, Tres Marias Collection will be closing their branch in Bukawi in about 2 months. They have 15 employees which offered with option 1. They will stay up to the closure of the branch and be paid with 150,000 on the date of termination. While option 2, leave before closure and they will be receiving 50,000 as a termination benefit. 2/3 of the employees expected to not stay up to the closure. So how much will be the liability of the TMC for termination benefits? Ganito lang yung solution dyan. So 50,000 na expected na ma-receive as termination benefit multiplied by 15 employees dahil 15 employees are expected to be terminated kapag nag-close na yung branch. Ang makukuha ay 750,000. No need to consider the 2/3 or what kasi hindi naman to makaka-apekto sa liability na kukumputin natin. Kasi lahat naman sila ay makakakuha ng termination benefits dahil aalis na sila at magko-close na nga yung branch. So, paano naman yung 100,000 na excess? Kapag nag-stay si employee, may 150,000 siya na makukuha. Yung 100,000 ay magiging excess kasi yung 50,000 doon ay part ng termination benefit. Yung 100,000 na yon ay magiging part ng short term. Hindi yan matatanggap ni employee dahil umalis na siya sa company. Pero matatanggap yon dahil nag-stay siya. This is the summary of Employee Benefits Part 2. Dinefine natin ang ibig sabihin ng benefit plan, which is to provide the agreed benefits. Therefore, yung employer ang shoulder ng risk kasi may pinarami silang benefit or specific fund na matatanggap ni employee. And then, next, yung 3 steps for accounting for defined benefit plan, which is determine the deficit or surplus, determine the net defined benefit liability or asset, determine the defined benefit cost. Next naman, yung components of defined benefit cost. Yung tatlo, yung service cost, net interest, and remeasurement. Tapos, diniscuss din natin yung other long-term benefits, other long-term employee benefits, which is to be settled beyond 12 months. And then yung termination benefits na pwedeng si employer mismo yung magtatanggal sa'yo at pwedeng aalis ka dahil may inoffer si employer mo. So, thank you so much. This sums up all
our topics for today, which is the part 1 and the part 2 of employee benefits.